I invite you to connect with the voices of the Bible as we step into one of the most pivotal moments in Christian history. Imagine being in Jerusalem, crowded with people from every corner of the known world, speaking in different languages, practicing different customs. Then something happens. Something so unexpected, so powerful that it transforms not just a moment, but the entire trajectory of faith itself. This is Pentecost, and this is the story of when everything changed. Now, to understand what happened on Pentecost Day, we need to step back for a moment. You see, Jesus had just ascended into heaven. His followers felt abandoned, confused, grieving. They were afraid of the religious authorities who had orchestrated Jesus' death. So they gathered in a house in Jerusalem, about 120 believers total, waiting for something they didn't quite understand. Jesus had told them to wait in Jerusalem for the gift his Father promised. But what exactly were they waiting for? Now, the Jewish festival was already significant. It was a harvest celebration 50 days after Passover. Thousands of Jewish pilgrims traveled to Jerusalem from across the Roman Empire, and this detail matters. You see, the disciples weren't isolated in a quiet room. They were in the middle of a bustling, multilingual, multicultural city. And then it happened. Suddenly, unexpectedly, a sound came from heaven like the howling of a fierce wind that filled the entire house. It wasn't a gentle breeze. This was violent, unmistakable, impossible to ignore. The disciples saw what seemed to be individual flames of fire alighting on each one of them, not threatening flames that consumed them, but flames that marked them, empowered them, transformed them. They were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and they began to speak in languages that they had never learned. The Spirit enabled them to speak in ways that exceeded their own capacity. This wasn't nonsense or ecstatic gibberish. People outside heard them speaking in their native languages. A crowd gathered, bewildered. Parthians and Medes and Elamites and residents of Mesopotamia and Judea and Cappadocia, all hearing the good news about Jesus in their own languages. Can you imagine the shock? These were Galileans, provincial people with regional accents, and yet somehow they could communicate across language barriers that normally divided people. Something supernatural had occurred, something that shattered the walls people built between themselves. Then Peter stood with the other 11 apostles. He raised his voice and declared with boldness what had seemed impossible just weeks before. "These people aren't drunk," he said. "It's only 9 a.m. No, this is what the prophet Joel foretold. God is pouring out the Spirit on all people, sons and daughters, young and old, servants and the free. Everyone will prophesy. Everyone will see visions. Everyone will dream dreams." This is radical. In Peter's time, the Spirit's power was reserved for prophets and kings, extraordinary individuals selected by God. But now Peter proclaims God's Spirit is available to everyone, slaves, women, ordinary people. This completely upended the religious hierarchy. It meant that divine power and connection to God weren't gatekept by religious institutions anymore. Peter points to cosmic signs, wonders in the heavens, signs on the earth, transformations in sun and moon, all pointing to the great and spectacular day of the Lord. But here's the hope. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved, not just the elite, not just the pure, everyone. So how do we live when everything changes? The Apostle Paul addresses this in Philippians. "Be glad in the Lord always," he writes. "Be glad again. Don't be anxious about anything. Instead, bring your requests to God in prayer with thanksgiving. And when you do, a peace that exceeds all understanding will guard your hearts and minds." This is the gift Pentecost offers us. The Holy Spirit doesn't just arrive with dramatic flames and rushing wind. The Spirit arrives to dwell within us, to empower us, to transform how we relate to God and each other. When life takes an unexpected turn, when everything changes, we're not left alone. We have access to the same Spirit that empowered those first disciples. We can speak across divides. We can trust that the Lord is near, that peace is possible even in confusion. On Pentecost Sunday, we remember that the church wasn't born from a comfortable plan or a predictable strategy. It was born from fire and wind and divine interruption. The Holy Spirit arrived when the disciples were uncertain, when cultural barriers seemed impossible to cross, when the future felt completely unpredictable. That same Spirit is available to us. When everything changes in your life, you're not facing it alone. The Holy Spirit is poured out on all people, including you. So this week, listen for the wind, look for the fire, expect the unexpected, and trust that God is already moving, already transforming, already creating fresh starts in ways we can barely imagine.